you're a product owner in 2026 and you're not utilizing agentic tools like Claude Code or Cowork, I think you're going to be very regretful about not getting started sooner. My name is Samir Tsingani. I've been a product developer and a product now manager in my role at the bank for about a couple of years now, or if not close to 7, 8 years now. I've built products. I've always really focused on workflows. I've been personally myself trying to figure out how I can run a one person business. And it's a little bit harder than it looks because I've been always trying to find ways to find outsourced talent, hire people overseas, give them laptops, make sure that they can work on things that I need. But I'm really finding that it's challenging up until we started to discover AI agents. And so this video, I'm going to talk about what AI agents are, understand what Claude Code is. You may hear a lot of terminology around Claude Code, CLI, Cowork. There's all these different tools out there, and why I think fundamentally the landscape is going to shift. So if you're a business owner, you're trying to figure out how you can operate more efficiently and how you can incorporate AI workflows into your business itself, there's a huge disconnect of what's happening right now in the market where people are utilizing and playing with the tools, but they're not actually getting any value out of it yet. So the point is, none of this is reaching production level state yet, and I think there's a big difference as to why that's not happening. So in this video, let me just explain about what MCP tools are, what is Claude Code, what is AI, and hopefully give you guys some context here as to why I think that you want to get ahead of this technology sooner rather than later. So let's dive right in. So first explain what Claude Code is. Claude Code is an agentic tool that you can utilize directly on your desktop. You can use it to organize files. You can use to develop code or create anything. Claude Code is the repo here on GitHub. And for those that are not aware of GitHub is really just a repository where code is based. And so as new technology gets rolled out, generally it sits in what's called a repository. GitHub is just a repository. It's really where the code is stored with change logs, etc. Now, what Claude Code is a tool that allows you to read code bases, you can edit files, you can run commands. And so the big hype right now around AI agents is that these agents can actually do work for you. And to illustrate that concept a little bit better, the way to think about these tools is that you have maybe, let's say, call it Claude Desktop. And that could be either Claude Code, which you run here directly in a terminal. A terminal just means this is how you can orchestrate or how you can give commands to your computer to run certain processes, like either create a folder or move a file, for example. But the terminal is really what I call like the cockpit to your computer. Now, when you utilize a computer, you may be familiar with using Finder or Windows. If you're opening up a folder, Explorer, for example, you may have a bunch of files here that you want to organize. This is what's called the GUI, the GUI. This is where you can interactively, as a user, be able to play around with folders and files. But the terminal is where you can give commands to orchestrate or move those files directly on your computer. And so Claude Desktop or Claude Code is really the same product, but it's a different way of how you interact with your computer. Claude Code is what they're doing now to help create a more business-friendly version of Claude Code. So Claude Code for the terminal is daunting. It seems tedious. Cowork, which is Claude's tool here, is meant to kind of eliminate that barrier, what may look like a daunting terminal-based command or a technology-driven tool. So when you look at Claude Desktop here, what's happening is you have Claude Desktop as your interface on what you utilize at the front end to ultimately interact with your computer. But what's happening now in the market is when you take it a step further, you can connect to what's called MCP servers. And MCP servers are really just ways that bridge the gap between a natural language. So you, as a person, may want to speak in English. You may not necessarily want to write a command as code. It's bridging the gap in how people can speak to computers. And MCPs really just take what you say as English and translates it into code or as a command for a downstream computer to run. And the big hype right now, what's happening is that these tools can interact with APIs. APIs are just other computers that are serving a certain function, call it a data point, or you can have it go and create a document. You can have it go look up some information for you. these MCP servers are acting as an interface between Claude Desktop, where you enter this as a command, all the way through to the API that may be served by Google, for example, or through, let's say if you're booking a flight, Expedia, for example, may have an API where they're offering you flight information through their API integration. So instead of you going to a website and let's say going to Expedia.com and booking a flight, what you could do here is utilize Claude Code to say, hey, find me a flight on Expedia leaving from New York to Orlando, Florida on Wednesday, February 18th. And so you can decide to utilize the Claude Code based command line, which is the terminal that we talked about, or you can go directly to the website. So okay, of course, it's not going to give it to me now, but to illustrate the concept, the idea is that you can utilize these terminal-based commands to go out and now orchestrate movements across the internet. And that's very powerful because now you as a product person can start to think of, well, what do I want to do? I may want to go off and find a flight, and then I may want to go book a hotel, and then I want to check to see what restaurants are locally. You can use API integrations or code to interact with those APIs to go off and fetch the information you want, and then you can use that as a way to plan your trip, so to speak. I'm using that as a very simple example. That's basically how interfaces like ChatGPT work. It's basically going off and finding information from host sites, from Expedia, from Google, from wherever. But now what's happening is they're reversing that equation where you have the ability to command it from the terminal. So hopefully that gives you guys some clarity into what's happening now with Claude and AI and why these tools are so powerful. Another good overview that I found was more around just like the actual CoWork tooling itself. Now, if you're a new beginner, if you're not really familiar with how AI agents work, if you're not familiar with how to code, totally get you. I've been there. I'm still kind of learning software development myself. But CoWork is their latest product and technology that allows you to kind of eliminate that barrier of getting fancy with the terminal. And so what CoWork is basically the same thing as Claude Code, which is the terminal-based command, with a browser experience. So you as a user can put in and say, can you help me find a flight going to Orlando, Florida from Newark? And obviously you may be thinking to yourself, like, this is probably like a very simple command that you may want to ask the chat feature to go find you, which is 100% true. And it's what the difference now is that if you have certain files or folders on your computer and you wanted to have it actually do work in that folder, and obviously the flight example is a really terrible example here, so I apologize for that. But what you can do is start to have CoWork do work for you on your computer. And so the biggest technology wave happening right now are the use of these what's called connectors. So in the simple example that we were mentioning before, you could have Google Drive as a connector. You could have Canva as a connector. You can use Figma or use Zapier. And instead of you going to Canva, let's say 2024, you would go into Canva, you would go and create an email, you would say, I want to use a certain template. What you can do now is instead of going to the websites and actually utilizing the website to create what kind of flyer or banner that you want, you instead say, can you use the Canva tool and help me put together, I don't know, a post for social media? Hit let's go. Now what's going to happen is it's going to go off and find the Canva connector. The connector, which is the NCP tool, is connected to the API. And then that is what's bridging the gap between your language of English to the actual underlying connector, which is Canva in this example. And it's helping you go off and find a way to create the social media post in this example, as opposed to you going to the website and having to physically do it yourself. Like use hands and keys and your mouse to try to go off and create the flyer. So now as we get into Cowork, Cowork is going to say, okay, well, what is this platform? What platform is social media for? You can do Instagram. You can say it's a product or a service, for example. We want it to be clean and modern. It's going to ask you a set of questions to kind of get an understanding of what you have in mind. And so what it's going to do now is it's going to look for certain templates that kind of match your style. Now, as you go through the prompts here, you can say, and this is for us, we run a photo video business. So yes, let's create a social post for our photo video service business. And we're going to answer the questions as they come up, so that way we can give more context to the AI here, the agentic tool here. So now it's going to go off and actually create the post for you. And now if you're a business owner, you can start to think how this can be extremely powerful here, because now as a user, as a product person, as a business owner, you now have the capability to go off and utilize Cowork as your cockpit, so to speak. You're in the driver's seat of the cockpit, and you can connect to tools out there. You can connect to Canva, you can connect to Google Drive, you can connect to insert your application here. So as you can see here, what's happening is Canva's now going off and actually creating the post for us. Now, let's just call it the olden days, call it like 3 months ago, this would have required me to go into Canva, click in, find a post, customize the template, enter the information, which, don't get me wrong, this is still pretty intuitive as a user from a user experience point of view. But if you kind of think about, creating, 10, 15, 30 different, social media campaigns, this can get tedious really quickly. So what Cowork allows you to do is, and of course it's not going to do it now live while I'm trying to speak to you guys, but it's going to allow you to kind of orchestrate movements across different applications, different tools. So another powerful thing to kind of think through is the use of what's called plugins. Plugins are tools that allow you to take a skill, and a skill here is something that sits in between, call it the MCP server and the API. I had a diagram here I want to show you guys actually. I like this one. This one is really, really powerful. And credit to the guy who created this. Skills are a way you can insert a specific knowledge base directly into Claude Code or any agentic software. And the reason why this is powerful is because what's great about these models is that they're trained on lots and lots of information. They know basically the world's information, which is really good, but it's also a double-edged sword, because that means that they're trained on the world's information, and they may start to hallucinate. They may start to go off and do things that you didn't ask them to do. So by ring fencing the agent in a skill, call it, let's say, financial analysis in this example, you allow the agent to really get to plug and play expertise. It's like saying if you went to school for business, for finance, for example, and you spent 4 years getting a college degree in finance, so that way you could do financial analysis. Well, I can kind of pull out that knowledge out of your brain, not your brain, but obviously you get the concept here. Plug out that skill, that knowledge, ring fence it into a plugin, and that plugin can be inserted into the AI to give it that expertise. That is powerful. That is powerful on so many different levels, because for knowledge work, for anything that requires a person to use a computer where they've spent a lot of time and energy to kind of develop that knowledge, we can now take that and we can allow anyone to become an expert in anything. And so what these plugins do are allow you to, as a user, to go grab any specific domain expertise and plug it directly into Claude Code, which is the terminal-based command, or Cowork, which is call it the business-friendly dashboard. And so in that example of finance, for example, we can pull in the skill to create journal entries. We can pull in the skill to do reconciliation. And now these are these are things that people have developed years and years and years of expertise to kind of get really refined at. And now these are fully available to anybody that's using Cowork or Claude Code. So you can see where we're going here. You can see that these tools are getting really, really powerful. They're getting really dynamic. They allow anyone that has access to them the ability to kind of create, call it social media posts. Let's see how our posts are doing. Of course, it's not going to work, but we'll debug all that later. But the idea here is that as you start to kind of think through like what kind of skill sets you guys are learning in 2026, this is something you want to get your hands around. You want to start to spend time understanding how these tools work and give yourself very simple examples. Obviously, the example I showed you today obviously didn't work, but the tools are available. The expertise is now becoming democratized. That means now that you no longer need to figure out how to become an expert at marketing, be an expert at financial management, be an expert at SEO, or learning how to create content. And I don't know how to create content. I'm going to lean on Cowork. I'm going to give Cowork and say, hey, look, I want to improve my YouTube experience. And you guys will see it right here on this channel. I want to get better at YouTube. What do I need to do to get better at YouTube? How do I create the title? How do I create the description? How should I be thinking about thumbnails, for example? And I used to think that I have to go off and get, some expensive designer overseas to help create me a thumbnail just so that way you guys can click on the video. Well, now I can tell Cowork, I can tell Cowork, hey, go off and find best practices here on YouTube thumbnails. Go and find best practices here on what kind of title is going to allow a user that follows SEO best practices to enable me to come up in video search, for example. I no longer need to be the expert in that. I no longer need to go off and study that. I no longer need to figure out how I'm going to go off in all these different websites and go create the thumbnail here, go create the title there. I can now utilize these tools, again, these MCP servers and skills to now ring fence all those different capabilities together. The MCP, again, which is the server that allows me to speak on what my intent is, take that intent, it can go off and grab the API. Those APIs are just protocols that different applications offer. So like Gemini, Google Gemini allow you to go off and create a YouTube thumbnail using Nano Banana, which is Google's image generation algorithm. You can have it write code for you. So if I want to run a sequence of code to say, okay, as soon as I'm done with this YouTube video, I want you to grab the video. I want you to go take the transcript. I want you to go and create the thumbnail. It can go do that. It can go create the code to help me write that step by step. And so that way, all I have to do now is just say, okay, publish this video. It can get that automated. It can utilize databases to store information. And you no longer need to go into websites like Supabase. And now I'll tell you just a simple example. I've logged into Supabase maybe like 3 times, maybe 4 times, where I have a production database of all of my tables here, and I control it all directly through this interface here. And this is where the technology is going. This is where the technology is allowing us to go off and modify applications, go grab data, do the analysis. Now we need to get good at how we clarify our requirements. How do we clarify our intent of what we want and use that as a way to take advantage of these tools? That's all the time I got for today. If you like the channel, like, subscribe. I'm a new YouTuber trying to get better at YouTube. So any questions, comments, you guys need help with, building workflows, understanding how these tools work, be happy to help. Just leave me a comment and I'll reply back. All right, to the next one. Peace.